Wounded Knee, South Dakota is widely known as the site of one of the worst massacres in U.S. history, a brutal mass shooting of up to 300 Lakota by the U.S. Army that took place in 1890. Far lesser known, however, is that it was also the site of a 71-day armed standoff between members and supporters of the American Indian movement and the U.S. government in 1973. On February 27th, Lakota people from the Pine Ridge Reservation and supporters from across the country marched to Wounded Knee to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the start of the 1973 occupation. The occupation was declared in response to a long series of injustices against Indigenous people in the United States, which had reached a boiling point and necessitated dramatic escalation. The approximately 200 fighters who occupied Wounded Knee demanded immediate federal investigations into corruption in tribal leadership and Senate hearings on the scores of treaties broken by the U.S. government. While the major demands on the occupation weren't met, it did lead to the passage of critical legislation such as the Indian Freedom of Religion Act, the Indian Child Welfare Act, and the Native American Graves Protection and Reparations Act. But the most celebrated legacy of the 1973 occupation is that it ended the campaign of assimilation being waged by corrupt tribal leaders and the U.S. government.
Together we're going to walk up to Wounded Knee, where 50 years ago our parents, our relatives stood and sacrificed their lives for us. So today we could have our braids out, we could speak our language, we could have our ceremonies. We're not afraid to be who we are out in the white world.
While Pine Ridge is no longer occupied by federal troops, the war against the Lakota Nation is still ongoing. Since the major issues that triggered the occupation went unaddressed, people living on Pine Ridge suffer some of the worst living conditions in the country. Pine Ridge Reservation is a food desert, with the nearest grocery store 80 miles from it. This means that residents of the reservation have to travel 160 miles just to buy fresh fruits and vegetables. On top of this, Lakota residents of Pine Ridge face an unemployment rate of 90%. Without jobs, 97% of families live below the federal poverty line, and the average median household income ranges from $2,600 to $3,500 per year. The average life expectancy for Lakota is 47 years for men and 52 for women, far below the average national life expectancy, which is 76 years. Rates of infant mortality, suicide, cancer, tuberculosis, diabetes, and high school dropouts are all magnitudes higher than the rest of the country.
Since 1973, not a lot of changes happened. A lot of the demands that were wanted are still continue on. We still trying to break down the racism, the white supremacy. I live in Rapid City myself, and we're still battling the courts. Leonard Peltier is still in prison.
I'm Choctaw from Oklahoma, and our land was taken away too. And you could say it was extremes. And in fact, I'm doing some history now where I'm tracing my original allotments of the land that we have left. The land is all gone, but we still hold mineral rights and resources, access to those things. And I'm finding out my great-grandfather, he was murdered to death. And I'm sure it was in regards to a lot of the land around that time. This was in the 1930s.
At the core of many of these issues is the 1.2 million acres of land in the Black Hills that was stolen from the Indigenous people. Originally, the U.S. had signed the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, which promised not to touch the land west of the Missouri River. But 6 years later, when the infamous General George Custer led an expedition that struck gold in the Black Hills, the U.S. violated the Fort Laramie Treaty and gave the Native people a fraction of what they were promised. In 1980, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the U.S. did indeed violate the Fort Laramie Treaty, but said that too much time had passed to give the land back, and instead offered the Lakota $100 million as compensation, worth around $1 billion today. To this day, the Lakota have refused this sum, saying that the Black Hills are not, nor have they ever been, for sale. It's also worth noting, however, that the settlement offered to the Lakota is likely worth far less than the value of the minerals under the Black Hills. Not only is there gold, but also uranium, lithium, and other rare earth metals. In the 1940s and 50s, 200,000 tons of lithium was mined from the area. The value of lithium has increased exponentially in recent years due to its use in lithium-ion batteries, a central component in the rapidly growing electric vehicle and solar energy storage industries, making the mineral deposits in the Black Hills even more valuable today. Last month, the Biden administration used a Cold War-era national security law, the Defense Production Act, to declare elements like lithium essential to national security and authorize the Department of Defense to take necessary measures to secure its supply. The United States has developed an increasingly warlike mentality around lithium extraction because it feels increasingly threatened by China's dominance in the electric vehicle industry, which is by far the largest in the world. By cornering the world lithium supply and subsidizing the US EV industry, the United States hopes to take over the world electric vehicle market and is deploying every tool it has, even the Pentagon, to achieve this goal. The Lakota Nation may very well get caught in the crossfire of this aspect of the US hybrid war against China. The magnitude of the crisis on Pine Ridge is a reminder that the government's war on the native people of this land never actually ended. It just took on a different form. Above everything that was said that day, there was an overwhelming call for Indigenous unity in the face of this uninterrupted campaign of assimilation and extermination.
Remember, we came here for the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. We didn't just come here to raise hell. We had to make a statement to tell the world that Indians are still alive. This is still our land, and the Black Hills are not for sale. So right now we got big problems up there with the mining companies. So don't be surprised if Indian people make another stand, because the only way they understand our people is for us to get together, to tell them in person. You can send all the telegrams, all the letters you want to, but unless you stand against them, they're going to take everything we got.